Good evening. Welcome to the April 13th edition of the Downers Grove Village Council meeting. We are once again in council chambers, this time with some guests as well, which is great. We do have public seating, but please remain mindful of total person limits and best practice on guidance and separation. If you're in attendance, please continue to wear your mask and watch your distance. Commissioners Jose and Gray are not with us this evening, but as always, we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Rosa, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Barnett,
Here.
Commissioner Jose, Commissioner Earl,
Here.
Commissioner Wallace,
Here.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit,
Here.
Commissioner Culvaney,
Here.
Commissioner Gray.
Thank you. For those in attendance, also, I'll let you know we have moved our public comments section, the general public comments, not about an agenda item, to the end of the meeting. It allows us to receive comment through the course of the meeting electronically for those who may feel more comfortable watching and participating from home. Item 3 on our agenda tonight is a proclamation concerning National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week. Whereas emergencies can occur at any time that require police, fire, or emergency medical services, and whereas an emergency occurs, the prompt response of police officers, firefighters, and paramedics is critical to the protection of life and preservation of property. And whereas public safety telecommunicators are often the first and most critical contact our citizens have with emergency services, and the safety of our police officers and firefighters is often dependent upon the quality and accuracy of information obtained from citizens. And whereas the DuPage Public Safety Communications Center, known as DUCOM, serves the public safety communication needs of the village of Downers Grove and surrounding communities. And whereas, while enduring long shifts and handling frequent life and death emergencies, DUCOM dispatchers set high standards in performing their duties in a dedicated, diligent, professional, and compassionate manner. And whereas DUCOM dispatchers provide a critical communication link between the residents of Downers Grove and police, fire, and emergency medical service providers. And whereas DUCOM dispatchers efficiently coordinate emergency services to ensure the health and safety of our residents, visitors, and travelers in our cities, towns, villages, and on our highways 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Whereas DUCOM dispatchers are rarely visible to the public while performing an exceptional service that deserves praise and recognition. Now therefore I, Robert T. Barnett, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, do hereby proclaim the week of April 11th through 17th, 2021 as National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week in the Village of Downers Grove, and commend the devotion, compassion, understanding, and professionalism of the DUCOM dispatchers. Dated this 13th day of April, 2021, Downers Grove, Illinois. If you know of any dispatchers, related to any, see any, give them a pat on the back. They are often an unsung, unseen hero, without whose help nobody else gets the work done the way they expect, the way our residents deserve. They are a huge help, and we owe them a lot on a day in and day out basis. Item 4 on our agenda tonight are minutes of previous council meetings. Is there a motion concerning previous minutes?
Mayor, I move to approve the council minutes of March 16th, 2021.
Second.
Any comments or questions from the council? Rosa, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Earl,
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace,
Aye.
Commissioner Culvaney,
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit,
Aye.
Mayor Barnett.
Aye. That motion passes 5-0. Is there a motion concerning tonight's consent agenda?
Mayor, I move to accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Any comments or questions from the council? Rosa, please call the roll.
Commissioner Earl,
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace,
Aye.
Commissioner Culvaney,
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit,
Aye.
Mayor Barnett.
Aye. That too passes 5-0. Moving right along, our active agenda tonight contains one item. The active agenda is the portion of the meeting where we typically plan to take action on a subject that has been previously discussed or debated, sometimes once, sometimes multiple times. Tonight, we have one item on our active agenda. Is there a motion concerning a rebate agreement?
Mayor, I move to authorize the execution of a sales tax rebate agreement with Steinhoffels, Inc. for the property located at 1021 Butterfield Road.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments from the audience on this item? Please come on down to the microphone.
Good evening, Council. I've got a general comment about these agreements, and then that feeds into a specific concern I have about this particular agreement. In looking at the village's website, I found the information regarding sales tax revenue rebates overly simplistic and thus less than helpful to citizens like me. The website fails to elaborate on larger issues surrounding them as they affect a region, a state, and the nation, and thereby how they in effect, put one municipality against another in what usually amounts to a race to the bottom, in which poorer communities tend to lose out most. Compared to the specifics one can infer from an actual agreement, such as the one with Art Van or the current one under consideration, I think it would be helpful if Village Council gave residents more information regarding the political economy of these agreements. One, I suggest the website's description explain how negotiations typically originate and proceed and how terms come to take shape. Identify who negotiates on behalf of the village. If more than the village and the business it is pursuing participate in the negotiation, who are they? How do they become involved? What factors enter their consideration, and what impact does their participation have? The language in the Art Van ordinance refers to multiple benefits as reasons for doing that deal. Elaborate on how ancillary benefits are determined during negotiation and what, if any, impact they have on reaching the agreement and on subsequent fulfillment of the agreement to the satisfaction of each party. Or are such references mainly window dressing? What, if any, evidence is collected to assess results versus claims, financial and otherwise, made in the ordinance? One notable example in the Art Van deal referred to creation of jobs. If and when evidence is collected, when and where is it reported? Number three, are individual and collective impacts of such deals reported in village budgets in such a way that residents can readily determine both their effect in actual versus projected terms? If not, why not? And then finally, here's the key point connected to the current deal. The Art Van deal screams of an asymmetry between negotiating parties. In particular, the village appears to be negotiating from a position of weakness. This asymmetry is reflected most clearly in what appears in retrospect to be the toothlessness of the reimbursement schedule defined in the ordinance. That schedule may look good on paper but lacks potency, or so the Art Van collapse revealed. I raise this point as a concern about the current deal under consideration and any such future deal. Specifically, why is the effective holdback so relatively minuscule? The village appears to have no collateral by which to make the reimbursement schedule collectible. Specifically, for example, why aren't the first N years of intended rebated tax held until the end of the N years over which 100% of the rebated amount is to be returned to the village if the business fails to continue operating? Given the exhortation by Village Council to residents to buy from businesses within the village, if money residents wish to go to the village as tax was not retrieved, the failure to hold collateral amounts to a double loss because the gap must be filled in another way if it is to be filled at all. If the village is unable to hold collateral, then why aren't the terms of the rebate agreement similar to those in a loan, which is to say the rate of rebated amount increases over time, a small percentage in the beginning period, rising for each subsequent period until the full amount is to be rebated is reached. If the business the village is pursuing is confidence in its commitment and expected success, I would argue this is not an onerous condition. For its part, the village handles such an agreement as if it's rebating at an equal amount each year, setting aside the difference between the equalized rate and the lower rate in initial periods of the agreement into a reserve. Its own spending is then unaffected. It has the funds required to rebate as the rebate percentage it rises in later periods, and it has control of the funds originally collected as tax if the business should fail and a reimbursement schedule needs to be invoked. Permit me to say in closing that if the village really wants to explain these deals on its website, rather than the simplistic description that is there at present, it should include precisely these financial flow options as they affect village finances over the course of the agreement. In that vein, I would also encourage the village to include similar explanations for TIFs, for the village's pension obligations, for operational costs, and for capital assets. Less than that level of transparency and information amounts to a hand-waving, trust us, we know what we're doing, and you wouldn't understand it anyway attitude, likely as not to yield more unpleasant surprises in future for both council and village residents.
If you'd like more specific answers, David, I'd suggest sending us an email. This was, as you know, talked about at previous meetings here amongst this group. The village negotiates every one of these deals with a host of entities, not the least of which is ultimately the people sitting up here. No deals are entered into unless the 7 of us, or at least a majority of them, agree. And they have also old sayings about things like blood and turnips and crystal balls. I'm thankful that we have a group of people that are working on putting these deals together on a regular basis, and I'm thankful that people see us as an attractive entity with which to try and do business. Any other comments from the council? Any other comments from the audience? Rose, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Kolovany?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Aye.
Mayor Barnett?
Aye. That motion passes 5-0. Takes us to our first reading portion of the meeting. The first reading portion of the meeting is where we begin to talk about subjects or continue to talk about subjects, but where we do not plan to take any definitive action tonight. We have a couple of items on our first reading, and with that, I'll hand it over to Manager Fieldman.
Thank you so much, Mayor. As you said, 2 items on tonight's first reading agenda. The first is consideration of an ordinance amending the fiscal year 2020 village budget. It is my pleasure to introduce for this item our Finance Director, Judy Budney.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. As Dave mentioned, I'm here to present the fiscal year 2020 budget amendment. Actual FY 2020 expenses ended the year below budgeted levels for most village funds, including the general fund. 3 funds were over budget and will require budget amendments. The debt service capital fund will require a budget amendment in the amount of $15,610,000, and the water fund will require a budget amendment in the amount of $1,330,000. These 2 funds were over budget due to the refinancing or refunding of the 2012 bonds. These bonds were refunded in early 2020 to save the village $1.7 million in future savings for our debt service payments. The police pension fund also requires a budget amendment of $100,000. This is due to greater than expected retirements in the police department. Staff is also requesting an amendment of $1,220,000 for the general fund. 2020 revenues in the general fund were $1.3 million lower than budgeted. As a part of the COVID-19 financial response plan, expenses in 2020 were reduced by $2.0 million. In addition, the village received $2.5 million from the CARES Act. Staff is proposing a transfer of $3.2 million from the general fund to the municipal buildings fund. This transfer will bring the 2020 expenses to $50.86 million, which is $1.22 million over the budget. This will keep the general fund balance within the range recommended by S&P and will also provide flexibility in the future to utilize these funds for new facilities. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Judy. Any questions from the council? Any questions from the audience? Let me just add, these budget amendments are always a little bit funky. What you're hearing here is a net positive for the community. It's a net positive for our financial condition and our financial strength. We essentially took an opportunity to refinance debt, which is a good thing, save us a bunch of money, but in doing so, that transaction causes some budget adjustments to have to be made for the prior year. The CARES Act money also that we received ended up helping us. Between that and some savings that we did from an operational standpoint, we ended up much better than we thought. The way this works with the law and our required reporting is that these are required budget amendments, even though for the rest of the world, you think of a budget amendment usually when there's a negative. We certainly could have that, but in this case, these are positives. So it's all spelled out in the documents associated with tonight's meeting. If anybody's got any questions, please go ahead and email them in. Thanks, Judy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Judy. The next item is a consideration of an ordinance approving a sales tax rebate agreement with Downers Grove Imports, better known as Poogie. Here to present information on this item is the President and CEO of the Downers Grove Economic Development Corporation, Michael Casa. Michael?
Thank you, Dave. Mayor Barnett, Commissioners, I'm here tonight to present a proposed sales tax rebate agreement between the Village of Downers Grove and Downers Grove Imports Limited, doing business as Poogie of Chicagoland. Last year, Poogie celebrated its 30th year in Downers Grove. Poogie opened its first dealership in Downers, which is Poogie Volkswagen, in 2005. It was followed by Poogie Mazda in 2009 and Poogie Hyundai in 2011. 3 dealerships from one auto group in one town is not very common. But the good news gets better as Poogie is adding a 4th dealership to its Downers Grove lineup. It is a Genesis dealership. In addition, Poogie is planning to remodel its Hyundai dealership and make improvements to its Mazda dealership. In the first year of the agreement, the Poogie dealerships as a group are projected to generate $1 million in gross sales tax revenue to the village. Gross sales tax revenue is expected to increase by 3% each year. For the first 2 years, the village will rebate 25% of that amount to Poogie, which is approximately $225,000. Thereafter, the village will rebate 50% of the amount of sales tax generated above the $880,000 base to Poogie, provided that all 4 dealerships are in operation. First, a little history. The village entered into a sales tax rebate agreement with Poogie of Chicagoland in 2005 to provide incentives to operate a Volkswagen dealership in Downers Grove. Poogie now operates, as I mentioned, 3 dealerships: Volkswagen, Mazda, and Hyundai. The agreement was amended several times. Rather than amending the existing agreement a 4th time, a new agreement has been drafted in order to simplify and restructure terms. So the agreement before you intends to consolidate and revise the agreements that we currently have. Poogie intends to demolish an existing 2,400 square foot building on their property and replace it with a new building approximately 9,000 square feet that will house the new Poogie Genesis dealership. The new building will consist of a showroom, office in the main level, and a service area in the lower level. Poogie also plans to remodel their Hyundai dealership and make improvements to the existing Mazda dealership and the parking lot serving the automobile dealers. The agreement includes the following key terms. It requires Poogie to construct the new Genesis dealership at 1860 Ogden. It requires Poogie to remodel the Hyundai dealership at 1866 Ogden. For the years 21 and 2022, the village shall rebate and pay to Poogie 25% of the sales tax revenue generated by the dealerships above the base sales tax amount. For the period at January 1st, 2023 through December 31, 2030, the village shall rebate a portion of the sales tax revenue generated by the dealerships above the base sales tax revenue amount of $880,000. The sales tax revenue collected in 2020. According to the following terms, if all 4 dealerships are operational, the rebate is for 50%. If 3 dealerships are operational, the rebate is for 37.5%. If only 2 dealerships are operational, it goes down to 25%. And if 1 dealership is operational, it goes to 12.5%. I have a feeling after 30 years that Poogie's not going anywhere. This agreement requires Poogie to operate the dealership until December 31, 2035, or pay back the tax rebate payments according to the schedule in the agreement. I want to thank Dominic Poogie and Gary Nuttleman, the Director of Operations, for bringing a Genesis dealership to Downers Grove. Poogie is the largest sales tax generating business in the village. And to paraphrase Dominic Poogie's TV commercials, their continued investments in our community is a beautiful thing. I want to commend the village staff for working out this agreement with our friends at Poogie. The Downers Grove Economic Development Corporation strongly supports this agreement between the village and our friends at Poogie. Gary Nuttleman, Director of Operations at Poogie, is with us tonight, and I think he might want to say a few words.
Just wanted to thank the council for our partnership and look forward to another 30 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the council?
No question.
Rich?
One comment.
Please.
First of all, we really appreciate that Poogie has been here for 30 years and that you continue to invest in our community, and whether we like it or not, we are competing with other suburbs just a little bit further west or a little bit further east on Ogden Avenue. It's our responsibility as a public body to look out for the interests of our taxpayers. We're pretty well known as having one of the lowest real estate tax bases in DuPage County, second municipally and on the municipal level, and I believe we're lowest overall. It means we only get about 30% of our operating budget from real estate taxes. So sales taxes are very important to us, and the fact that a fine business like this is willing to expand and then even tie the success of all 4 dealerships speaks really well of this agreement, and I intend to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Any questions from anyone in the audience? Okay, seeing none.
Just want to offer staff's comments and thanks for the continued investment from the Poogie dealership, Dominic Pugliani, and Gary, and everybody on the team. We appreciate their partnership. They've been a joy to work with, not just on this deal, but going back to the early 1990s. With that concludes the first reading, Mayor. Thank you.
Manager's report.
No report tonight, Mayor.
Fantastic. Attorney's report.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a report, 2 items to present tonight. The first is an ordinance amending ordinance number 5831 and the Village of Downers Grove budget for fiscal year 2020, and an ordinance approving a sales tax rebate agreement with Downers Grove Imports, doing business as Poogie of Chicago. Both will be on next week's active agenda.
Great, thank you. Now we are on the public comments portion of our meeting. We've moved this to the end, as I mentioned before, to allow for online comments. Mr. Baker, any online comments?
No, sir.
Okay, anybody in the audience want to speak on a subject not on tonight's agenda, please come on down to the podium.
Hello, Mr. Mayor.
Good evening.
My name is James Kelly. I've got need some critique. Any of you suggest you got a pen? Feel free to send me a copy. It's fresh off the press. Alcohol free? No, it's actually got alcohol on it still. I was here a couple of months ago, and I made a comment about me being homeless. And since then, I've had, a lot of things told to me. The biggest thing that I was told to me is that I'm brave to admit that I was homeless. There's nothing to brave about it. It was a situation I was in. I'm not in a situation now. And one thing I strongly believe in my heart, and I've learned through my life experience, is critique. I did a VIP feeding. It had nothing to do with homeless. It was open to anybody in the community. We had a lawyer there that tipped the food truck guy $20 because he liked the rib tips and the fried chicken. We had another neighbor there that says, hey, I want to know where I can get this truck because I've got a company I want to do an event. Okay? And yeah, we gave away about 40 meals. The majority of the meals were not for the homeless. There was from people that couldn't well afford it, and I was there most of the time, and they loved it. I was very proud of it. I was very proud of the Pastor Scott permitting me to do it on a rush. Kind of like doing that kind of stuff sometimes. And I want to thank the encouragement from Mr. Mayor and the rest of our city council. I have to say something personally to me is why I was in here in this town. I can name a list of businesses that treated me like no different than anybody else. And to be honest with you, it was a wonderful thing because you don't get that in any other community sometimes. It's a very thin thing. The respect, the kindness, the consideration. I plan on doing another event in town. Actually, I plan on doing a couple events in town. But the announcement I have for you tonight is we're going to be honoring one of your longtime non-for-profits in this town. His name is Jim Elliott. He does Dive Heart. He's awesome. And he's going to be receiving our first Humanitarian Award. We're going to be doing an event at the Grand Duke's restaurant, which I highly recommend. Okay? Everybody else got to eat there because I'm on a diet. And we're going to be doing that on June 17th. And in the meantime, we're going to be doing other fundraisers. If anybody knows any charities that need energy and lifted, event when this comes out in actually full release, they can contact me. I believe in networking. If anybody in City Council here feels like critiquing, making suggestions, give me a heads up. I have a wonderful staff on my non-for-profit. They don't work as hard as me, and I'm sure you guys understand that. So on that note, enjoy. And like I said, this should be out probably in print. You can look for it in the Irish American newspaper. You know, I'm Irish, what can I say? And the title is, in the corner here, Everybody's Irish on St. Patrick's Day. And I think you'll enjoy it. It's not a downer. And the only thing I ask of anything that where this paper goes, it's from encouraging people to do the right thing, to be successful, from the little kids to mom, to dad, to businesses. My non-for-profit that I started 14 years ago and restarted again, it's called Successfully Yours and You. Nothing personal, but State of Illinois fought me for 2 years to use that name. And I'm determined. So when my determinedness met a lot of politicians. And eventually they changed the laws. I think I had a little bit to do with it. You have to put non-for-profit behind it because the state of Illinois and the Secretary of State said that you can't use the word successful because it involves money. No, successful does not involve money. Especially now because, as the mayor quoted, it's about humanity. It's a new era in life. Thank you very much for your time. Sorry to talk so much.
Where will we find these when they're in print?
These should be out in the Irish American newspaper and my own separate paper, probably between the 20th for me forward and me first in the Irish American individual.
All right. Thanks for being here, Jim.
Thank you very much.
Jim? Yeah, you want to introduce yourself to those two individuals?
Hi.
They're successful entrepreneurs and know a lot about stuff like this. They start work on May 4th.
What do you guys do? What do you guys do? You guys talk.
All right, we'll keep moving on. David, you want to, got some more to say?
I do. We're going to follow up from our exchange on the 13th last month. The last time I spoke in 2020 before the council regarding environmental sustainability, I asserted council's definition was politically deceptive. Commissioner Jose said without elaborating it was not. At last month's meeting, I tried to follow up that exchange by asking the commissioner to state the definition he was defending. Before he was able to respond, you, Mr. Mayor, intervened and prevented him or anyone on the council having to expose themselves as incapable of stating the council's definition. When I further asked if anyone on the council could articulate the process that had led to adoption of the definition, you, Mr. Mayor, replied it was an evolving one but provided no specifics. I contend a more accurate statement is that the definition has not evolved. It has never been discussed with anything close to the degree of staff and council effort and attention this council gave cannabis, for example. In 2019, Commissioner Jose himself acknowledged the aptness of my observation that council had stumbled onto the phrase. Likewise, prior to 2019, both he and you, Mr. Mayor, were commissioners of a council that could not elaborate to the contrary when I asserted the council had no definition and no metrics by which to assess performance. Thus, I challenge this council to disprove the following more accurate description: that the first and only time a definition has been articulated was when one was inserted into the council's so-called long-term plan. Rather than reflecting a thorough examination, assessment, and discussion of alternatives, that definition simply stated the way in which councils have been operating. Specifically, that articulation implicitly reflected the desire by the corporate Democrat and corporate Republican types who dominate membership of councils to have the village be seen as business-friendly. According to their shared way of thinking, environmental sustainability is simply one of many subjects to be avoided like the plague when trying to attract business and negotiate deals. As I pointed out when I first responded to the written definition nearly 2 years ago, the council claims its responsibility on environmental sustainability extends no farther than its own operations. Presuming for the sake of argument its efforts were actually adequate, one potentially ends up with the morally defective contradiction of a council who imagines, for example, that an energy efficient, environmentally friendly new police station and village hall offsets council's lack of attention and concerns about the impact of its policies and regulations on the village's environmentally unsustainable way of life. Such a stance is akin to the drug dealer, arms dealer, human trafficker, or any perpetrator of exploitation who sees himself as a good Christian because he attends church on Sunday, ties in the offering plate, and so on, while blithely discounting the means by which the income is generated and the effects the business has on others. Is this, in fact, the culture of both the Village Council and Downers Grove as a whole? Are residents conscious of the impact their way of living has on the larger world? Why does the council persist in maintaining its own and fellow residents' ignorance on the matter? For as Martin Luther King warned, nothing in the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity. Instead of making environmental sustainability a genuine and primary goal, the council persists in its deception, facilitating thereby the village's small but consistent contribution to humanity's quickening race to bring about societal collapse. Seeing economic growth as inherently a good thing, council refuses to consider the possibility growth is making matters worse. To council's way of thinking, material overconsumption is not something to be restrained, it's to be encouraged. Last fall, for example, I pointed out the disproportion in recent years between the council's significant attention to promoting growth and its complete inattention to environmental sustainability. What is the impact of that growth on the village's environmentally unsustainable way of life? Who knows? Who cares if it helps generate more tax revenue, especially given the council's commitment to help keep residential property taxes as low as possible. Council believes it's all good, and council doesn't want to ponder or find out otherwise. Perhaps in an inadvertent way, council's disregard is ultimately to the good. It's good because it hastens the onset of that collapse, a circumstance for which few are prepared or preparing, and as such will be faced only when we humans, including even the psychically, socially, and seemingly financially well-insulated, such as residents of Downers Grove, have no other choice but to question our undying commitment to capitalism. To repeat an observation I made last year, this pandemic is the first globally shared, directly impactful negative manifestation of humans living environmentally unsustainably. As such, we should recognize it as a forewarning and trial run, and much as we may like to believe otherwise, it is far from having run its course. In closing, permit me to ask council to address two questions. One, will anyone go on record to state if he or she agrees or disagrees with my statement, the present way of life in Downers Grove is environmentally unsustainable? Number two, regardless of your answer to question one, will anyone go on record stating, if not council, what level of government is responsible for assuring the way of life in Downers Grove is environmentally sustainable? Or if you believe government should not take responsibility for meeting the goal, can you please explain how you believe environmental sustainability is to be reached? Thank you.
That's a tough way to approach a group, man. So-called exposed corporate Democrat, Republicans dominating council, akin to drug dealers and arms dealers, morally deficient. It's a pretty tough way to encourage a group, but okay. Any other comments from the audience? Okay, we will move on to mayor and council member reports. This is the portion of our meeting where council members weigh in on subjects typically going on in the community or other organizations they're in contact with or members of. Let's save Rich for last. Marge, did you start?
Actually, I have something a little bit weighty to talk about because I'm not going to be here in a month, and so now is the time to do this. We've talked before a little bit about village council compensation, and I am willing to bring forward next week a pay raise, an increase in our village council compensation, which hasn't been done since early to mid-90s, I believe. It wouldn't take place until, the earliest it could take place for some people would be 2023, and then everyone would be up and equal at 2025. So I don't know if we could do something where it just took effect in 2025 for everyone, or if this had to be phased in for whoever isn't voting on it. But it would take effect then essentially after, with whoever is elected in 2023 and 2025. I was proposing that commissioners go to $5,000 a year and the mayor go to $10,000 a year. Just a rough rounding up. If anybody has any other thoughts, I'd be open to them. And also to make sure that this isn't a problem anymore, we can put a yearly cost of living adjustment tied to the indice of your choice onto the end of this, so that we don't have to ever worry about it being out of sync or needing to adjust it again, because it's always a hot political topic. So I'd love to hear thoughts from my colleagues.
I'll start. I appreciate you bringing this up, Marge. It is a funky thing to bring from the dais. But, you know, you're doing so at this point is important. You've mentioned it before, and I know you're sincere about it. I know there's a question that we don't really know the answer to, but we wonder whether or not this is clearly not a full-time job for everybody. But we wonder whether the lack of compensation impedes some from wanting to participate that might. Whether it be child care or the ability to knock off early on their hours periodically. There are tasks that this group has to do, and there are certainly a ton of hours that every person here spends. And And as I understand previous conversations, the premise here would be that folks wouldn't be eligible until they were reelected.
Correct.
So it's kind of the opposite of us electing ourselves a pay raise. I think it's a good thing, Marge. I would fully support that. And, weigh in from the rest of our colleagues here. Anybody else want to jump in?
Sure. Yeah, I agree with your sentiments, Mayor. I think that it could certainly be cost prohibitive for especially young people or young families who want to get involved in village government, but work long hours and can't necessarily afford childcare, or even if we're talking about folks anyone on a limited income. So I definitely also support it for all the same reasons. So thank you for bringing it forward again.
Rich, please.
When I first got the briefing document, I looked at that and I said, we had a change in 1954, and speaking from memory, then the next one was 1997. I think that's a pretty long time. My take-home pay is $40.34 a week. I do whatever I want with it. I'm in a lot different income situation than I was, a few short years ago. So we find a place for every single dollar. So I'd like to be able to have seniors who have a lot of time, energy, intelligence, experience, that don't have a lot of income, be willing to step forward. And for those who have to pay for child care, I hate to preclude them from that. I don't particularly care about getting reelected. It's not my focus up here. My focus is to make a difference. So if people say, oh, you raised your pay, so be it. So if I get $60 a week or $55 a week, we can argue about that. Overdrink that out loud. So that makes it reasonable for me.
I don't want to be too repetitive here, but Commissioner Earl and I have had this conversation before, and oftentimes my husband will travel, and oftentimes one of our parents cannot step in, and we need to get a babysitter, and childcare is not cheap. Anybody who has children knows that. When I walked into this position, getting appointed in 2016, I had no idea whatsoever that it was paid. And when people told me, I was like, what? Oh. And then they told me it was, $40 a week, Commissioner Culvaney? And I was like, what? Okay. I think that's great. Because I had no idea to begin with. Now having been in this role and knowing how much work we all do outside of here, and the events that we're asked to be at, and the meetings that we're asked to be at, and all of these things, and trying to balance all of that when many of us also work full-time jobs. I appreciate the fact that this would not start until 2023 or 2025. That makes me much more comfortable. But yeah, I would definitely get behind this.
Does anybody have any feelings as to whether it should start halfway in 2023 and then the other half in 25, or if it should all just start in 25 with the 25 election? I don't know if that, I'm looking over at Enza because I'm not sure. I think we can do it that way because everybody was.
You can't do it sooner.
Right, you can't do it any sooner, but you could do it later. So I don't know if you guys have a preference. I'm not going to be running again as far as I know, so I don't really have one. But I just thought maybe somebody might.
I think I could go either way. I don't know. I guess if the idea is to get more people that would not normally run, then it would be 2023.
Yeah, right.
But
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go with the 2023. Let's go with, is there any specific, or do you want just staff to pick whatever cost of living data they use to tie it to?
Why don't you guys put something to, you certainly get the sentiment up here.
Yes, we've been working with Commissioner Earl on this project going back a couple of years now. We will take this as general council direction to proceed to a first reading item next week, which will allow this council to finish this business and allow this time frame that's been talked about here tonight to occur. We'll work with Commissioner Earl on a proposal of a couple of indices that may be tied to the adjustment.
I just want to add, for those that might be watching at home, first of all, again, an appreciation for Marge for staying on this and bringing it to us. But also just a reiteration to everybody that this group up here serves their community because they want to. It really, we are different in many ways. Obviously, the pay that we've just talked about, but we also are not the beneficiaries of any benefits. We are not the beneficiaries of a pension system. You're looking at community volunteers at the highest level, perhaps, but nonetheless, really community volunteers. And what this does is I remember when I started, the pay was described, and I don't even remember who described it to me, but it was described as it allows you to participate in your community a little more than you might otherwise if you felt like you had to watch your time. That's it. This is not how anybody makes a living, and they're certainly not going to make a living at $5,000 or $10,000 either. So I think that it maintains, for me, it maintains that same sentiment, and I think it's a good thing. Thanks again.
You're welcome.
You know, and also particularly for the mayor, because the mayor position has to do a lot more heavy lifting than individual commissioners. It's just the nature of the job. He or she has also got a big target on their back, where they're running for things that are totally outside of their control, even things related to other taxing bodies. And, they spend more time away from their families as a result, and even from their professional commitments.
Want to continue?
I think that's plenty for tonight. Thank you.
Thanks again, Marge. Oh, I'm sorry, David, come on down. This is normally not what we do, but I know you got lots you want to contribute. Come on down.
On the subject of encouraging people to participate, is there a way to tell me if it's precluded or not, the following idea, that we just had an election, for example. One of the things I've always wondered about in terms of the way vacancies are filled, like when you became mayor, there was an opening. The council selected those people, I assume partly because of the logistics of the challenging logistics of running another election. Is it permissible and wise to say that the outcome of the previous election, if the person who was next in line, so to speak, was interested in being on the council, if there was an opening, is it potentially appropriate to move that person into the open position rather than have the council itself select who fills that open position? Like in this most recent election, we had 2 new candidates come forward. Whoever was next in line, is it possible to have them fill that vacancy and have rules be devised to allow
Many
that?
things are possible. That's what our current set of rules, that's how our current set of rules and the state set of rules lay out how we're to fill that position.
If I could interrupt, Mary, it's following the state law
Right.
by the letter, and to taught me well on that issue. So it is actually a state law that the village council follows.
So anything
That requires-
anything is possible, but the state's rules about how that position gets filled and the way we operate here suggest that's it. So is there a possible alternative? Yeah, but not within the rules.
What is it about state law that in some places you have appointments versus elections,
We
you
could
know?
probably send you some stuff. There's the state speaks to an enormous number of procedural issues relative to replacing people at various entities and various government groups across the state. As you know, we've got 5,000 of them or whatever. We could get you more if you really want it, but what is it about it? That just happens to be that. It's probably 60 years old or so.
Yeah, I was just curious because it's always intrigued me that we don't know as citizens when a vacancy arises, even who's put their name forward, and then how the process works that council actually makes the decision. That's why it occurred to me to just throw out the idea of having that next person in line who did not succeed in the prior election, but who was put before the voters.
Yeah, just to be clear, when we've done that 3 or 4 times in my tenure up here, and there's an advertising process that we go through to request that people apply from the public. It's
Right.
made very public who those applicants are, and there's no limit to who can apply. There typically is a window of time, of course, but we go through great lengths to make sure that the general public is aware that this opportunity exists and ask them to submit.
Oh, yeah, no, I understand that, but that's why I thought in terms of this idea of figuring out ways to encourage more people to run for office, that coming in as the next potential person if a vacancy arose for some reason. I don't know, maybe there would be intrigue within the village to encourage a
Sounds to me
vacancy.
like you're just trying to knock off the mayor.
Mr. Mayor?
Please, Rich.
Also, there's nothing that precludes a candidate that didn't prevail from, applying for that position. And in that case, I don't think we got anyone to do that.
Yeah, I don't know. You have to think back. Nicole?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't usually like to speak for other people up here, but I think that what I'm about to say will be appropriate, that I speak for all of us. Just continuing the thoughts, prayers, positive thoughts with Katie and Chuck Kalasek of Busy Bee Bakery. The outpouring of support from the community has been heartwarming. It's been incredible. I checked both. There are 2 GoFundMes that have been circulating social media. Both of those combined, I think when I checked at 7 a.m. this morning, were around $79,000 for the family. I believe Chuck has been transferred to Northwestern to receive some additional care there. So our thoughts, prayers, positive energy is with that family at this time. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Leslie?
Yep, I just want to echo, yes, all of our love is certainly with the Busy Bee family. I also just want to welcome Rich back because I'm really excited to see him. I think I speak for everyone, I'm sure, again, that could not be more thrilled to see you in person, and we are so grateful to have you back here. We could have never imagined it, and we are just grateful for the recovery that you have made and will continue to make. And I do want to congratulate everybody who won in the previous election. We're lucky enough to have our 2 new commissioners-elect here, Commissioner-elect Glover and Commissioner-elect Bill Martin in audience. Congratulations to everyone else who won, and a big thank you to everyone else who put themselves out there. It is really tough to campaign. It is tough to not just put your work, but also just your whole self and your family out and be a target. So I want to thank everyone for running and doing that, and I'm really excited to get to work. That's it.
Thank you.
It's very good to be back. And, it's unfortunate that the wearing of masks has become political and that people kind of tuned out some realities here. It's a very insidious disease. I caught it at work. For the people who say, well, you should just be more careful or stay home if you're afraid. I wasn't afraid. It was funny, even the day I contracted this disease, I told the guy who probably gave it to me that, I think if I would have gotten COVID, I would have gotten it by now. And the next week I was diagnosed with it, so it hit me. It hit, Chuck the baker at Busy Bee. It hit Jim Mendrick's son. He put that on social media. So people we know, people we hold in high regard, are getting this disease. This thing transferred to members of my family, even though I isolated right away, even when I thought I had the flu. And 8 family members and family friends ended up getting this disease, and it just went through all of us. Now, luckily enough, my daughter was the only other one who ended up in the hospital. So I would say for the people who have these strong sentiments about the government can't tell me to do something, well, your mother certainly should have, or your grandmother, or the person who gave you care. Did they say you should cover your mouth when you sneeze or cough into your elbow? So it's just really a matter of common courtesy. And, to be ridiculed for wearing a mask outside, what if somebody sneezes next to you and they're asymptomatic? They didn't know that they had it. I'm sure the person who gave it to me didn't think he was sick, but, and it was a really tough situation, not only for me, but excruciating for my family. So I was communicating, the reason I rushed in here, with one of my son's friends, whose mom is in Good Sam, just transferred in the ICU, and unlike me, she has some underlying conditions, so this is going to be a rough road. So people we know and we care about, this thing's still hitting them. And unfortunately, it doesn't matter that we're fatigued. This is like a baseball game that never ends. It keeps going on and on and on. We have to stick to it, regardless of our fatigue. So I would just ask you to use some common courtesy
for other people and protect them. Thank you.
I'll pick up a little bit where Rich left off. I had a couple of words which I wanted to read. As he was talking, I just looked up a couple of numbers from the DuPage County Health Department dashboard. 4,411 Downers Grove residents have gotten COVID. 4,411, and 64 have died. That's a big deal, guys. That's not a couple of oddballs out there. That's a real serious thing. Rich is certainly a testament that we're all thrilled about. But when your neighbor or your friend or your relative says it's no big deal, well, there's 64 families that are without somebody now that needn't be. And there's 4,000 families that have had their world flipped upside down. Some to greater degrees than others, to be sure, but every one of them has struggled. On this week's DuPage County Health Department call, I'm on a health department call with some staff members every Monday, have been now for 13 months. On this week's call, they specifically called out a few things like kids eating out together after a sporting event, folks getting together after a school event, as driving a spike, because we absolutely do have a spike. The spike is the big increases in cases between 29 to 39-year-olds and 49 to 59-year-olds, both groups. And here's the thing, guys. Based on current trends, the health department suggested positivity may once again hit or exceed 8%. It's 7.1 right now. That's a big number. We were down in it's still single digits, but we were down around 2% not that long ago. And they're concerned because 8%, 9% starts to trigger Illinois Department of Public Health and Governor Pritzker actions. So you guys all remember how much fun that was. It's a real possibility. For some perspective, hospitalizations have doubled in the last 30 days. Hospitalizations in DuPage County have doubled in the last 30 days. The 7-day rolling average in new cases in DuPage has doubled as well. It was 122 on March 15th. This Monday it was 252. Again, for a little perspective, last summer, when we were feeling good about stuff, that number was under 50. So it's doubled in the last month, and it's 4 to 5 times what it was last summer. Despite the sun, the warmer temps, kids' sports, blooming trees, all the things that are giving us hope, the vaccines that are around, as of this week, as of Monday, I haven't checked it right now, but still less than 1/4 of DuPage County residents are vaccinated. Despite all the vaccines that you see and hear about, and all the TV, and all the selfies that people are posting, and social media awareness for getting vaccines, less than 25% of 1 million people that we engage every single day are vaccinated. It is a long ways from being past us. There's lots of good happening. There's lots of vaccines going out, and people are hustling to get them, but we are a long ways from over with. So please, the last thing I wanted to say is I want to urge everybody to not abandon caution. Don't pretend like because you know somebody that got a vaccine or you got one and the sun's out and it's 70 that they're somehow behind us. This is a very real issue that is still amongst us. We will get past it. All the paths are headed down the road to success in this thing, but we're not there yet. And in the meantime, we want to stop that number from 64 from growing at all. We'd like to all get through this thing and all be with each other again this summer. So please, make good choices about minimizing risk. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all. Good night.